Did you know that the best way to progress your goals, build a meaningful career, and succeed in long-term relationships is to do nothing? That's right, nothing. Let me explain. I'm not talking about being passive or lazy. I'm talking about a specific type of nothingness backed by research that can transform your life. It's actively doing nothing, to pause and wait rather than acting on your impulses, or scrambling to fix problems in your own strength. It's about listening and discerning and waiting for the right timing, actively trusting that things will work out. So my name's Daniel Sih. I'm one of Australia's leading time management and productivity experts, with award-winning books about how to help busy people make space in the digital age. In this video, I will outline the science of doing nothing, of not trying to solve and fix and control. I'll explain how this type of nothingness can help you win in sport, fast track your career, and help you succeed in longer term relationships. And I'll give you a few practical examples about how to practice this type of active nothingness in everyday life. And like all things I do, my heart is to help you make space and to hold that space for long enough to experience a better life. A few years ago, I stumbled upon a fascinating research study that opened my eyes to the power of doing nothing. It was about football, or soccer as we call it in Australia, and the way in which goalkeepers save penalties in professional matches. If you're not a sports fan, stay with me on this one. Imagine this scenario. It is the knockout stage of a World Cup football final. After 2 extra periods, the game is still tied, and so we're down to a penalty shootout. And these are winner-take-all moments. There are hundreds of thousands of fans screaming from the stands, and another billion viewers watching a live telecast on the edge of their seats. And it comes down to 2 people, 1 kicker and 1 goalkeeper. Here's what's interesting in a penalty shootout. The ball moves so quickly that goalkeepers can't rely on reaction time to know which direction to jump. They must choose the direction that they're planning to jump into before the ball is kicked. Which raises an interesting question. Which direction is it better to jump in a high-stakes penalty shootout? Is it to the left or, which way? Is that left or right? Is it better to jump to the left or to the right? This is the very question that Israeli researcher Michael Bar Eli and his research team set out to discover. And I think the results are fascinating. After analysing 286 top league and championship match penalty kicks, when goalkeepers jump to the right, they have a 12.6% chance of stopping a penalty. Pretty slim. When they jump to the left, they have a 14.2% chance of stopping the ball. Again, not much better. But when goalkeepers stay in the middle, supposedly doing nothing, they have a 33.3% chance of stopping the ball. That's a huge improvement. I mean, goalkeepers know this. The stats are out there. And yet 98% of the time, they still jump left or right. They hardly ever stay still in the center. I mean, why is this? Why would goalkeepers choose to dive left or right when it reduces their chance of stopping a penalty? The answer is quite simple. It's about our psychology. Being active feels more productive. When everyone around you expects you to be active, well, then it takes a lot of courage to slow down, to be still, and to make space to essentially do nothing. This is called action bias, and it's our automatic tendency to take action even when the better option may be to hold back and not do anything at all. In a high-pressure football match, the fans expect goalkeepers to dive. So do the sponsors, so do the commentators. And if you miss a penalty after diving left or right, well then people will forgive you because it looked like you were doing your job. But if you stand still in the center, supposedly doing nothing while the ball flies past your ears, well then you look like an idiot. It looks like you haven't done your job, even though statistically, staying in the center of the goals was the smartest thing to do. And so, understandably, world-class goalkeepers choose to jump to action, even though inaction is sometimes the wisest thing to do. And we all do the same across myriad spheres of life. So as a productivity expert and a space maker, I believe this has massive implications for the way we make decisions. Where might action bias be negatively affecting my life? In what ways am I jumping to action when actually doing nothing might lead to a better outcome? And what might need to shift in my mindset and psychology to make space when everyone around me is frantically busy? I'm not saying that we should always choose inaction. In fact, in most situations, action is actually the best way to keep moving. I'm not saying that you'll solve your problems by avoiding them, waiting endlessly for someone to solve things for you without effort. What I am saying is that sometimes, particularly for task-oriented doers, the most effective action is inaction. The practice of letting go in an intentional way in order to achieve better outcomes. Remember, I'm talking about active nothingness. During a penalty shootout, when a goalkeeper is supposedly doing nothing, staying put in the center, they're still alert. Their eyes are wide open, they're focusing, and they're paying attention to their surrounding. In this situation, they're choosing inaction strategically in order to achieve the best outcomes. This is very different from wasting your time doing nothing, scrolling social media and wondering why the hours are flying by and hoping things will get better. It's a type of nothingness that requires skill and practice and actually a bit of bravery. So doing nothing is an internal discipline that is tough to do, but in the right situations, it delivers outstanding outcomes. It takes effort to make space and to hold that space when it's uncomfortable, to avoid fear-driven activity. One of the problems with action bias is it's more prevalent when things are going badly. We get caught in the action trap when we're losing, not winning, working harder to solve problems that can't be fixed with action. If you think about it, it makes sense. When your team is winning, you keep doing the same thing, whereas if you start to lose week after week, well, then you change the lineup. It's why governments panic and flood the economy with free money in a pandemic. It's why we buy sports cars in a midlife crisis. It's why we reactively respond to that Facebook message when it's much better to ignore it and be silent. It's why we go on and on trying to fix a marital argument rather than cooling off and sleeping on it and solving things the next day. When we're in trouble, we are more likely to jump into fear-driven activity for the sake of activity. This type of action leads to worse outcome. And again, there's nothing wrong with making changes when things aren't working for you. I mean, this makes sense and it's logical. Just don't act irrationally for the wrong reasons, doing something compulsively just because you have to do something. Okay, so let's get practical. How can doing nothing help you achieve the results you want to achieve in your work and life? Let's start with work. I used to be a physiotherapist, and one day my manager came to me and said, we've just been given $180,000 by the Commonwealth government to do something about acute low back pain admissions in hospital. My job was to find a way to spend this money, and it had to be something new. I mean, it felt like I was jumping left or right for the sake of jumping just because there was money, even though it wasn't on our plan. In the end, I did start a low back pain drop-in clinic, knowing that it was a bad idea. It took a year of my time, it was a massive distraction, we spent a lot of money, and it didn't achieve very much. If rather than jumping to action just because the money was there, we were able to stop and actually think about whether this was a good idea in the first place. I see this all the time. I see people start projects and start new things on a whim just because they like shiny things. We end up with more and more on our plate with exhausted teams and actually achieving less than if we'd slowed down and had more thought in the first place. We all do this in some way. We jump when we'd be better off being still. How often do you dive into an email when you'd probably be better off doing something more important? Or find yourself in meaningless meetings because you didn't stop to think, should I actually accept this invite in the first place? The cost of all this action and activity is that we end up busy and frantic on silly small stuff rather than taking time out to be considered and thoughtful and achieving things that truly matter in work and life. So the next time your email pings or your phone rings, well then maybe pause for a moment and think about your goal. Act on your motivations. Is it better to act in the moment immediately or pause and make space to think? Okay, let's move the spotlight to relationships. How does doing nothing help build and sustain longer-term relationships with the people you love? By nature, I must admit I'm a doer and a fixer, and yet I've discovered, sometimes the hard way, that you can't always fix a relationship. Sometimes you simply need to make space for the other person. Be present and let go of control. You're laughing, right? I'm learning this as a husband. When she's sad or disappointed or in pain, the solution is often to do nothing. To just listen, be silent, and make space. And the same is true in parenting, right? My daughter has just started to drive a car. And I'm learning to make space and do nothing. The doer in me just wants to text her and make sure she's safe, or download an app and track her every movement. But that's not going to strengthen our relationship or teach her to make wise adult choices. When she heads to a party, I need to practice being still and making space and doing nothing and trusting that she'll be okay. So there are so many areas of life where this applies, but how might you apply this idea in your own life? Where is action bias negatively affecting you? In what ways are you jumping to action when sometimes doing nothing might be a wiser response? And what needs to shift in your mindset, in your heart and psychology in order to let go of control and be comfortable with doing nothing? So let me finish with one final practical point, because I've found this really helpful in my own life. When you find yourself acting out of fear or hyperactively wanting to fix a problem, well then act like a professional goalkeeper. Be still, stay put in the center and actively do nothing. Be wide-eyed, curious and attentive, but make space and see what happens next. And if you hold this space for long enough, being still and silent, well then something amazing happens, something that has transformed the trajectory of my life. In the space, you can discover kairos moments, those quieter moments that have meaning and significance, where you can detect life's meaning and discover the next step to the problems you're trying to solve. This is what I want to dive into in my next video. So if you found this useful, I'd love you to subscribe to my channel and keep an eye out for my next video about kairos moments. It's just a click, but honestly, it's super helpful. And of course, please leave a comment. I personally read each one. I find it really helpful to know what's resonating and to hear any questions you might have. It'll guide the way in which I shape this channel. Until next time, make space. Yeah!
Nailed it.